Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I have something thrilling lined up for you. 3 spine-chilling tales from the darkest hours of the night. These are stories of fear, mystery, and the unexpected encounters that can happen during the graveyard shift. So, grab your favorite blanket, dim the lights, and get ready for a dose of night shift horror. Let's dive into these eerie adventures and see what lurks in the shadows when most of the world is fast asleep.
Story 1. Echoes in the Rain.
Rain pummeled the corrugated metal roof of Granny's pantry, a symphony of drumming that drowned out the comforting hum of the fridge. Amelia perched on a stool behind the counter, nibbling on a tuna melt. Her dad, Tom, was out fishing for the first time in months, and her mom, Clara, was tucked in bed with a nasty cold. Late shifts were usually the quietest, and tonight was no exception. Just a couple of weary truckers had stopped by for coffee and jerky, leaving Amelia with a sense of peaceful solitude. Suddenly, the rusty bell above the door jangled, its discordant clang a jarring note against the rain's rhythm. Amelia tucked her sandwich away, a friendly smile already in place. Business was business, even on a night like this. But a peek through the rain-streaked window panes revealed no one. Puzzled, she called out, "Hello? Need a hand finding something?" Silence. Frowning, Amelia stepped out from behind the counter and patted down the aisles, peering around towering shelves of canned goods and fishing supplies. In the back, near the pet food display, she saw him. A man, hunched low, his back to her. He was motionless, a dark, hulking figure against the dim light. Amelia's stomach lurched. Who crouches in a bait and tackle shop like that? Curiosity piqued. She cleared her throat and approached. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you find something specific?" The man spun around, startled. His face was obscured by the shadows, but Amelia saw a flash of wild panic in his eyes. He was unshaven, dressed in mud-caked clothes, and the stench of rain mixed with something else, something primal and unsettling, filled the air. Before Amelia could react, he scrambled to his feet and bolted for the exit. She watched him disappear into the storm, a knot of unease tightening in her gut. Shrugging, she returned to the counter to close out the register. Just as she secured the cash drawer, a spine-tingling thud echoed from the back. Adrenaline surged through her. Grabbing a heavy wrench from behind the counter, Amelia's hand trembled as she gripped the cold metal. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she crept towards the noise, each creak of the floorboards magnified 100-fold. Turning a corner, she froze. There he was, bathed in the harsh beam of her flashlight, the same man from before. But this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He clutched a massive ice axe, its sharp point glinting menacingly. Amelia's breath hitched. Her mind scrambled, refusing to accept the horrifying scene before her. "Who are you? What do you want?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The man didn't answer. He stared at her, his eyes devoid of any human emotion. He took a menacing step forward, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Panic surged through Amelia. She stumbled backward, the clatter of dropped tools echoing in the dead silence. The man lunged, the ice axe raised high. A deafening crash shattered the tension. The lights flickered and died, plunging the shop into darkness. Amelia screamed, a primal cry of terror. In the ensuing chaos, she tripped, landing hard on the cold floor. Tears streamed down her face as she scrambled away, her hand blindly reaching out for anything to hold on to. Then, another sound, not the terrifying clang of the ice axe, but a deep, familiar voice. It was Tom. He appeared in the doorway, the outline of his broad frame illuminated by the flashes of lightning outside. In his hand, he clutched a crowbar. Amelia's choked sobs turned into desperate calls for help. The struggle that followed was brief but brutal. Amelia squeezed her eyes shut, unable to watch as her father fought off the crazed attacker. Finally, a heavy thud followed by an unsettling silence. Lights flickered back on, revealing a scene both horrific and bewildering. The intruder lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious, a dark stain spreading on his chest. Tom stood nearby, panting heavily, the crowbar abandoned at his feet. But there was something different about him. His normally warm brown eyes held a terrifying glint of cold fury. "It's okay, Amelia," he rasped, his voice gruff and unfamiliar. He took a slow, menacing step towards her. Amelia backed away, fear constricting her throat. It wasn't her father. Not anymore. Tom, or whatever was now inhabiting his body, crouched down, picking up the ice axe. Amelia screamed again, but the sound caught thick in her throat. The man raised the weapon, a cruel smile twisting his lips. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking towards the back storage room, where a faint whimper escaped. Amelia's heart lurched. It was Luna, their golden retriever, usually tucked away in her cozy bed behind the counter. But tonight, fear had driven her to seek refuge in the storage room. Tom, or whatever entity controlled him now, turned towards the whimper, a predatory glint in his eyes. Amelia knew she had to act. In a burst of desperate courage, she grabbed a heavy can of fishing tackle from the shelf and hurled it with all her might. It connected with a sickening thud on the back of Tom's head. He stumbled, the ice axe clattering to the floor. Seizing the opportunity, Amelia scrambled to her feet and bolted towards the back. Reaching the storage door, she fumbled with the lock, her fingers numb with fear. Just as she managed to open it, Tom was on her, a snarl twisting his face. He lunged, but Amelia squeezed through the narrow doorway, slamming it shut behind her. The flimsy door wouldn't hold for long. Amelia huddled in the dark, trembling, Luna whimpering beside her. She could hear the frantic sounds of Tom trying to break down the door. Her mind raced, searching for an escape. There was a small window high up on the back wall, usually used for ventilation. It was a long shot, but it was her only chance. Scrambling onto a stack of empty crates, Amelia managed to reach the window. It was rusted shut, but with a surge of adrenaline, she ripped it open. It wouldn't allow for a full escape, but it was big enough to squeeze through. She helped Luna onto the crates and then, with one last desperate glance at the splintering door, she pushed herself out into the pouring rain. The ground was slick with mud, and the wind howled like a banshee. But Amelia didn't care. She ran, Fueled by sheer terror, Luna scrambling at her heels. Behind her, the sounds of the collapsing door echoed through the night. She didn't stop running until she reached the familiar glow of Mrs. Johnson's porch light 2 streets down. Pounding on the door, she screamed for help, her voice hoarse with fear. Mrs. Johnson, a kind elderly woman, opened the door, shock etched on her face. As Amelia stumbled inside, gasping for breath, she could hear the distant wail of approaching sirens. Relief washed over her, warm and comforting. Tom, or whatever it was, wouldn't get away with this. Days turned into weeks, then months. The police investigation yielded few answers. The intruder remained unidentified, and the entity that had possessed Tom vanished without a trace. Tom himself lay in a coma at the hospital, the doctors baffled by his condition. Amelia stayed with Mrs. Johnson, attending school online and taking care of Luna. The nightmares, however, were relentless. The image of her father's face, twisted with a horrifying, inhuman smile, haunted her sleep. One evening, while flipping through an old photo album at Mrs. Johnson's, a picture stopped Amelia cold. It was a black and white image of a young Tom, standing beside a man with a cruel, unsettling glint in his eyes, the same glint that had haunted her in her dreams. The caption at the bottom read, "Tom and Uncle Edgar, 1978. A cold dread filled Amelia. Could it be? Was the entity that attacked them somehow connected to her father's past? The answer remained a chilling mystery, a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. But one thing was certain. Amelia knew, with a horrifying clarity, that the fight for survival was far from over.
Story 2. Shadows at Rusty's Relics.
The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the endless rows of boxes stacked in Rusty's Relics, a dusty warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix. Max, a lanky teenager with a mop of unruly brown hair, plugged in his headphones, the pulsing rhythm of his music drowning out the monotonous hum of the forklift. Unloading the latest shipment of vintage oddities was his nightly routine, a job that offered both solitude and a decent paycheck for a college kid. Tonight, however, the rhythm of the music was interrupted by a sharp rap on the metal door. Max Pulst, eyebrows furrowed. He wasn't expecting anyone. Rusty, the eccentric owner, wouldn't be here at this ungodly hour. Pulling out an earbud, he cautiously approached the door, peering through the grime-coated glass. The parking lot was deserted, bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the smog. Shrugging, Max resumed his work, the music now a shield against the unsettling silence. But then, another sound shattered the quiet, a muffled thump from the front of the warehouse. Heart hammering in his chest, Max ripped off his headphones and grabbed a metal crowbar leaning against a nearby crate. He crept towards the source of the noise, each creak of the floorboards echoing in his ears. Reaching the doorway, Max peeked around the corner. The front office was dark, the silhouette of a tipped-over desk chair the only anomaly. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. Had someone been here? An attempted break-in? But nothing seemed out of place. Suddenly, a loud clanging sound erupted from the back of the warehouse. Panic surged through Max. He wasn't alone. With a newfound urgency, he sprinted towards the back, the crowbar clutched tightly in his sweaty hand. The sight that greeted him was enough to turn his blood to ice. The heavy metal back door hung open, its latch hanging by a single rusty screw. Moonlight streamed through the gaping hole, illuminating a shadowy figure standing just outside. It was tall and thin, its features obscured by the darkness. Max froze, fear paralyzing him. The figure turned its head, its eyes reflecting the pale moonlight like two malevolent beacons. In that split second, a primal instinct to survive kicked in. Max lunged forward, screaming at the top of his lungs. The figure flinched, startled by his sudden aggression. It mumbled something unintelligible before turning and disappearing into the night. Max, adrenaline coursing through his veins, raced back to the office and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he reported the break-in. The police arrived within minutes, swarming the warehouse. They confirmed someone had indeed exited through the back door, leaving no trace of entry. It was an unnerving mystery. Thankfully, nothing appeared to be missing from the stock. But for Max, the night left an indelible mark. The image of the shadowy figure haunted his dreams, a chilling reminder of his brush with danger. He quit his job at Rusty's Relics soon after, the warehouse's silence now a constant source of unease. Weeks passed, and Max, haunted by the experience, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One evening, while scrolling through a local news website, a headline grabbed his attention. "Missing man, last seen leaving Rusty's Relics." It was a picture of the figure he had encountered, but older and slightly less menacing. His name was William Evans, a former employee of Rusty's, reported missing a few days before Max's encounter. A cold dread filled Max. Was William the intended target that night? Or was Max somehow involved? Unable to shake the unsettling feeling, Max decided to visit Rusty. The warehouse looked different in the daylight, less menacing. Rusty, a wiry man with a perpetually worried expression, ushered him in. Max explained his encounter with William, hesitantly at first, then with growing urgency. Rusty listened intently, his face creasing with worry. "William wasn't supposed to be there that night," Rusty muttered, his voice low. "He was fired years ago for stealing some valuable artifacts. I thought he'd moved on." Max's mind raced. Stealing artifacts? Was William after something specific? Suddenly, Max remembered something. A peculiar box he'd noticed while unloading the latest shipment. It was ornately carved, unlike anything else he'd seen in the warehouse. Curiosity gnawing at him, he rushed back to the warehouse with Rusty in tow. They found the box tucked away in a corner, hidden amongst other crates. As Rusty carefully pried it open, a gasp escaped his lips. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a silver compass, its needle spinning wildly. But it wasn't the compass itself that sent shivers down Max's spine. It was the inscription etched onto its surface. "The gateway awaits." Rusty's voice was a raspy whisper. The warehouse, once a familiar haven of dusty relics, now felt charged with an unsettling energy. Max stared at the inscription, a sense of dread tightening his throat. Gateway to what? And what did it have to do with William? Rusty, his brow furrowed, explained a local legend whispered amongst antique collectors. It spoke of a hidden chamber within the Superstition Mountains, a place said to hold a portal to another dimension. The legend was shrouded in mystery, dismissed by many as a campfire story. But the compass, with its inscription and erratic needle, seemed to confirm its existence. Suddenly, a horrifying realization dawned on Max William. Perhaps driven by greed or madness, had sought to find this gateway. But for what purpose? And could he have somehow succeeded? An unsettling thought flickered in Max's mind. Was William responsible for the strange occurrences at the warehouse, the shadowy figure observed before his disappearance? Driven by a mix of fear and morbid curiosity, Max and Rusty decided to investigate further. Armed with a map rumored to lead to the chamber's location and the strange compass, they embarked on a perilous journey into the rugged Superstition Mountains. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, and the silence was broken only by the howling wind and the occasional shriek of a bird of prey. Following the map's cryptic directions, they traversed treacherous slopes and navigated through dense, thorny brush. Finally, as dusk began to settle, they stumbled upon a hidden crevice camouflaged by loose rocks. The inscription on the map matched the entrance perfectly, a stylized carving of a compass needle pointing towards a half-moon. With trepidation, Max and Rusty pried open the entrance, revealing a narrow, dark passage. The air inside was thick and stagnant, carrying a faint metallic tang. Armed with flashlights, they ventured deeper, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The passage twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the mountain. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a large cavern. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The cavern walls were adorned with intricate murals depicting otherworldly creatures and swirling vortexes. In the center, bathed in an ethereal blue light emanating from an unknown source, stood a massive stone archway. The air crackled with a strange energy, and a low humming filled the cavern, making the ground vibrate beneath their feet. Max's heart pounded in his chest. This was the gateway, the same one depicted on the compass. William must have reached here first. But where was he now? And what horrors lay beyond the archway? Suddenly, a chilling realization struck Max. The inscription on the compass, "The gateway awaits." It wasn't a statement, it was a warning. The gateway wasn't meant to be opened. Panic surged through him as he understood the terrible mistake they'd made. Just then, a low growl echoed through the cavern, sending shivers down their spines. They turned to see a figure emerge from the shadows. It was William, but not quite. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, and his body seemed to contort in unnatural ways. He spoke in a voice that was no longer human, filled with a chilling malice. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. He lunged at them, driven by a monstrous hunger emanating from beyond the archway. Max and Rusty, fueled by fear and adrenaline, scrambled to escape. They fought their way back through the narrow passage, William's inhuman snarls echoing behind them. They finally burst out of the crevice, collapsing onto the hard ground just as the full force of the desert night descended upon them. Looking back at the mountain shrouded in darkness, Max and Rusty knew their ordeal was far from over. William, or whatever entity had possessed him, was trapped but not defeated. They had to find a way to seal the gateway and ensure the horrors it held remained hidden. Their adventure had just begun.
Story 3. Storm warning at Oasis Motel.
The flickering neon sign outside the Oasis Motel cast an eerie blue glow on the deserted street. Inside, Maya, a wisp of a girl with eyes the color of storm clouds, tried to ignore the creaking floorboards and the howling wind outside. Night shifts at the budget motel were usually dead quiet, especially during storms like this. The rhythmic drumming of rain against the window did little to soothe her nerves tonight. Just as Maya reached for a stale donut from the break room, the phone shrieked to life. Oasis Motel, good evening. Maya here, she chirped, her voice strained. Any rooms available for walk-ins? A raspy voice crackled on the other end. It sent shivers down her spine. Hold on a sec. Maya punched a few buttons on the ancient computer. The screen flickered ominously. We do have one vacancy, sir. Single or double? As if on cue, a silhouette materialized outside the rain-streaked glass doors. A tall, gaunt man, his clothes plastered to his body, peered intently into the lobby. Maya's breath hitched. It was him, the man on the phone. The door creaked open with a groan, and the man stumbled in, leaving a trail of muddy footprints on the worn carpet. He looked wrecked, his face a mask of desperation etched with worry lines. Room, please, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper above the storm's roar. Maya forced a smile, her hand hovering near the silent alarm button, hidden under the counter. Sure, sir. Can I get your name and ID, please? The man shuffled closer, his eyes bloodshot and vacant. He placed a worn wallet on the counter, his hand trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Maya scanned his driver's license. The name on it, Daniel Evans, matched the one he'd used on the phone. As she typed the information into the computer, a cold dread washed over her. The credit card reader buzzed angrily, a red error message flashing across the screen. There seems to be a problem with your card, sir, Maya stammered. Her voice barely a squeak. Daniel remained silent, his gaze locked on the blinking light. A tense silence filled the air, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain. Slowly, a horrifying realization dawned on Maya. His eyes, devoid of any warmth, held a chilling desperation. He wasn't just tired. There was something else, something darker lurking beneath the surface. Suddenly, Daniel lunged forward, his voice a guttural growl. Room. I need a room now. He snatched his wallet back, a glint of metal catching Maya's eye. A switchblade, its sharp edge glinting menacingly under the dim lights. Panic seized Maya. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. With trembling hands, she hit the alarm button. A silent signal flashed, a red light blinking near the door. The dial tone on the phone seemed to stretch on forever. Daniel slammed his fist on the counter, the blade of the knife inches from Maya's face. Where is she? Tell me, he screamed, his voice laced with a terrifying urgency. Thinking fast, Maya blurted out the first room number that came to mind. Room 104, she lied, her voice shaking. Relief flooded her as the wail of sirens cut through the downpour, growing louder with each passing second. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then shoved past Maya and raced towards the corridor. Maya watched him disappear, her legs turning to jelly. When the sirens screeched to a halt outside the motel, she was still slumped over the counter, gasping for breath. Two police officers rushed in, their faces grim. We received a report of a disturbance. One of them stated, his eyes scanning the lobby. Maya, her voice still shaky, explained the encounter with Daniel and the terrifying display of the knife. The officers assured her they would search the building and took down her detailed description of the man. Later, as dawn painted the sky a pale pink, a shaken Maya sat in the break room, sipping on a lukewarm cup of coffee. The police had apprehended Daniel in the parking lot, trying to break into a car. However, the unsettling detail remained. Daniel wasn't just some random, desperate man. He'd known the name of a guest, a woman registered under a different name. How did he track her down? What was his connection to her? The answers came later that afternoon. The woman in room 104, a young woman named Chloe, came down to the lobby, her face etched with fear. As Maya hesitantly explained the night's events, Chloe's eyes widened in horror.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to listen to similar stories in future.